The reading today comes from Reverend Mark Morrison Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength is too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed.
Well, good morning, All Souls. It's so nice to say All Souls because it's like I could see your souls and say good morning to them, and it's a beautiful thing. Your souls are beautiful things. I'm not wearing my stole today, you may notice. That's not an intentional thing. Sometimes it will be, but today I just simply forgot it at home. As we are in the midst of unpacking and getting used to this new job, it's going to help everybody here if you sort of have the fiction about me that I'm sort of the absent-minded professor. That's not necessarily true, but I think it'll be a benefit if we think of it that way. I'm just lucky to get out of the house with everything zipped and buttoned. We're good. So, have you ever gone to a movie without knowing anything about it? No buzz, no trailer, no idea whether it's a comedy or a horror film or a sci-fi or a drama, you know. And so maybe you assumed it was a comedy and then someone slipped on a banana peel and you laughed, but everybody else gasped because this is the moment when that person has a life-changing injury or something. When their assumptions, expectations can be dangerous, but when they're accurate, expectations prepare us for what is to come and help us to understand what is happening when it's happening more astutely and more quickly. And so the reason I mention that is because on Thursday, which is my writing day, I sat down and produced a reflection that picked up on what you all had produced last week in service as a couple of key words for what you yearn for and what you bring to this community. I wanted to write a response to that formally, so I did, and it was pretty good, and you'll hear it, just not today. You see, as I reread it, it occurred to me that in the end, it just wasn't time for that. It felt like running before we were walking in terms of our relationship. You don't know what to expect from me. You haven't seen my teaser trailer yet. So I decided to revisit that reflection in the near future, and instead today, at the risk of coming off as an insufferable narcissist, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from ministerially. And so, you know, you could think of today as the trailer for the movie that is to come, so that you will know what kind of show it's going to be. Not that it's a show, but, you know, it's a metaphor. You know. So I suppose the first thing to make clear is that your spiritual well-being is of the utmost importance to me. I'm tempted to assure you that I love you, but that would only be generically accurate. I don't know you. It's more precise to say that I am deeply invested in your spiritual life, regardless of how well we know each other. And that investment will inevitably and organically foster love, as it has begun to do already, with each personal encounter I've had with you. And that is a delight. So that's something that you should know about me. As a minister, I stand for accuracy. Sometimes I hope that accuracy will produce a precise kind of poetry in my musings and yield something real. And other times it's going to feel a bit over-labored. But what can I say? I think it's worth it in the end, and would just ask for patience and kind feedback if the rabbit hole gets windy. And today very well might be Exhibit A. So, what do I mean by spiritual well-being, and why is yours so important to me? For me, spirituality is the sense of connection, such that connection is felt as identity. A spiritual experience is one in which your identity expands, because you have expanded what you identify with. Where it was just you, now it's the universe, or a song, or a tree, or each other. I suppose it's true that one may have an experience so awe-inducing that it feels like it obliterates rather than expands identity. This is the so-called ego death of mystics, psychonauts, and Satori junkies, right? But I sort of think that that's the same thing as identity expansion, just with a massive scale and rapid acceleration. So these ego death moments are expansions of identity beyond what we are capable of holding as identity. But we don't have to contain it or articulate it to experience it, right? But a spiritual experience doesn't have to be on that level. It doesn't have to be ego death. And that's not even what I'm angling for, necessarily. A very simple example of the kind of spiritual experience that I hope to cultivate with you is the sense of home. You identify with the objects and arrangements and the smells and the light of your home. Home is meaningful. It holds stories and memories. It impacts you beyond the material. It is an other or additional to material experience. You know home in your bones and are known by it. You are of it, and it is of you. That is interbeing and interdependence. So when you're at home, your being is more robust than it is when you're not at home. And so my mission is to help us have that sense of home in the world. And that is important to not only your sense of well-being and satisfaction, it is important to the world. What is meaningful is cared for, is sacred, is beloved. So spiritual experiences of this kind will shift how we operate in the world, and I would say they will shift how the world operates in us. And the principle of reciprocity is always operative here. The fate of our world is bound up with our spiritual well-being. The fate of the world is bound up with our spiritual well-being, and vice versa. So, how do we cultivate that? How do we take that ideal and make it practical? That is the central question of my life and ministry. And I have some ideas. You'll have to come back to hear them, though. After all, this is just a teaser trailer. I can tell you, though, that I will expound upon my ideas about that from this position on Sundays. But the work of it, both in co-creation and in execution, will take place in small group ministries. And those will start when I feel like I've got some capacity to do so, maybe this winter after the house is done being painted and unboxed and I know more of your names. So I want to underscore that bit I just mentioned about co-creation, because it highlights another aspect of this ministry, of my ministry, which is really our ministry. We are in a co-ministerial situation, me and you and everyone in this community. Now, co-ministry is an awfully big topic, and we will explore it at some length as we progress together. Suffice it to say for now that I look to you for counsel and wisdom, creativity and enthusiasm, administration, pastoral care, and inspiration. Not only for me, of course, but for the whole community. We're in this together. I will help guide you, but this too is reciprocal. As to theology, I feel like I'm not this or that, nor am I neither. If I had to put a name to it, I might call it pantheistic animism, which means everything is holy and in communion and in communication, everything. Personhood, for me, is not synonymous with or limited to humans. The mission, then, is to develop the Rosetta Stone of the beings around us. I am what science writer Leandra Haupt calls a rooted mystic. Basically, a nature-worshiping tree hugger that understands that mystical insight and ecological science are mutually reinforcing and necessary. And everything is interdependent, which I sort of have bumper stickered into the slogan, I am of you and you are of me. But then to me, so much of theology is really just vocabulary. I don't see a whole lot of effective difference between me and an atheist or a Hindu or a Buddhist or a progressive practitioner of the Abrahamic traditions if we are doing all of that in earnest. Just be kind. That's the fiber. And the rest is icing. Just that icing is the most delicious part. So as to what happens on Sunday, you already know, I hope, that I like to get the congregation participating in as many ways as possible. That'll look like more some days than others. Sometimes that will look like a handful of you, and sometimes it'll look like all of you. Anyway, interaction is also always welcome, so I hope that's okay with you. Is that okay with you? Yes. In any case, my mindset is that religion, actually it's not even a mindset, it's my observation as a religious studies major in undergrad and a minister now, it's my observation that religion is necessarily participatory and experiential. So I hope to provide you with the opportunity to have an experience. I hope to engage the wisdom and memory palette of your bodies as well as your brains. Religion engages meaning using many tools, including but not limited to our bodies and time, by the way. And this is true for all religions, and we diminish our reason for being if we forsake these modalities. So to that end, I would note that ceremony is an invitation to know our values and our worldview in our bodies. I'm very much a head guy, so to compensate for that, perhaps, I'm trying to get myself more in my bodies, and I'm taking you all along with me if you care to come. All right. Thank you. So, ceremonies are spiritual experience because they are expanding our way of knowing, including but exceeding the intellect. Ceremony is a way to expand our identities, and so it's a spiritual experience. We will do ceremony approximately one Sunday a month. These ceremonies will comprise what is known as a liturgical calendar. Repeated over the years, this confluence of time and body and soul roots in our being and frames our experience, becoming part of the Rosetta Stone of being, right? As we do ceremony, our ability to communicate to the world will naturally expand. So right now, I'd like to trot through our liturgical calendar so you know what's coming. And you can trot with me. In fact, so I'm going to make a gesture to correspond to each ceremony. And if you'd like, you can mimic my gestures. All right? Gesturing helps us remember. There you go. Not all of my gestures. That would be really weird. That'd be awesome if one day like someone new came in and we were all just kind of doing the same gestures. They would, I don't know what they would think. Okay, so when I start, you can mimic my gestures. And it will help you remember. It will help me remember. All right, so we're already embodying today. Are you ready? Okay, if you are, here we go. The liturgical year and gestures. Water communion in September. All Souls Day, Samhain in October. Soil communion in November. Solstice/Christmas, this is a star, this is little baby Jesus. In December. And then in the spring, we will graft onto Lent. The Christians grafted onto the pagans, so turn around is fair play. We will graft onto Lent with a thing that carves out a hole in each day to welcome wholeness in our body, which is holy and culminates appropriately and symbolically and deliciously with a communion of donut holes. So for obvious reasons, I've dubbed that thing Holy, Holy, Holy Days. It makes more sense on the page, but I hope you get it. Then, depending on the moon, I guess, because spring holidays get lunar, generally. We've got Earth Day, and we've got, this is my favorite one, got Easter. And flower communion. All right, so let's do them all. It's like a dance, right? Ready? Water communion, All Souls, All Souls Day, soil communion, Christmas, Holy, Holy, Holy Days, Earth Day, Easter, and flower communion. So it's a dance. If you're new today, so am I. So one more Sunday service note. I believe that one thing that Unitarian Universalism is desperately lacking are myths. Myths are memory machines. Myths are the connective tissues of the spirit to the world. and we don't really have any yet, or we're borrowing from others or from our ancestors. And for a bit, we'll continue to do that. We'll play with the myths of our ancestors and carefully, respectfully, and maybe with myths of other people's ancestors. The first and last non-ceremony Sundays of every month will feature a retelling of a myth told by two different people on either end of that. So likely with two different perspectives and possibly two different versions of the same myth. And myths, by the way, I think are in constant state of evolution, so it may not sound like the myth you're familiar with, and I give permission to make editorial adjustments as the Spirit moves you. They're not written in stone. After all, these myths will be at least somewhat relevant to the ceremonies of that month, right? And will allow me to make reference to them in my reflections. Thus, with reflections and myths and ceremony, we knit a whole cloth. By the way, we're going to need some good storytellers. So for this myth part, if you're a good storyteller, or you know a good storyteller, please send me an email. I'd like to get at least 4 people. So if you're a natural-born performer or natural-born gift of gab kind of person, let me know. Oh, and the sermons I call reflections. Maybe you've already picked up on that. I do so because a sermon, that word feels to me too top-down. Each Sunday, I will present to you my reflections on a topic, and when I do so, you will then be reflecting on that topic with me and together. So reflections as a frame feel more co-creative and even more accurate. So now, all of this is done with the aim of putting us in deeper relationship with ourselves, with each other, and the world, our non-human kith and kin. Deep relationship is a kind of love. And love, in public, as Cornel West has said, is what justice looks like. So we will let our love lead us into efforts to make this world more just for people and beings. And that will likely mean as much work on ourselves as on the systems of the world. This is hard, joyful, sometimes scary work that is deeply spiritual because it expands our identity. Finally and quickly, as I've gone on too long, I think, I'd like to be part of you shaping this organization into a reflection of our understanding that existence is interdependent. I'd like to help craft an institution that is a whole cloth, coherent, cohesive, sticky, and compassionate. One way to influence that is to make sure we do not have power outside of process. And that will feel constrictive to some at first. But power outside of process is destructive to an institution, dismissive of other people's dignity, and undemocratic. So as I draw this teaser trailer to a close, it feels like an appropriate place for me to make one last thing, and that is to let you know that while I am here for you and hold your spiritual development in the most precious and encouraging regard, I am, in the end, a pretty private person. Put a premium on my family and on my alone time. In terms of like the introversion, extroversion spectrum, I'm bipolar. I love being with people until I don't. And as much as I love humans, my energy comes from being in spaces without other humans. And I also tend to get lost in the joyous world of ideas. So please don't mistake my preoccupations and need to recharge as a rejection or lack of interest. Chances are I'm thinking about you. Or maybe college football. But probably you. you and your spiritual well-being. After all, I am of you, and you are of me. As we leave this sacred time and place that we have created together with one another, with all our souls, let us do so looking to the world as home, learning how to develop that sensed and felt reality that already exists, walking in love with the world and in love with each other, and moving into a better world of justice and spiritual depth. Let's go in peace. Please stay cool, and let us go with a little music.